Hi everyone, it's Annie from AK Luxury Properties with a very special guest today to help answer some frequently asked questions that I've been getting in regards to the newly passed Prop 19 legislation. So stay tuned to find out how it might affect you and your family because time is ticking on this one. Okay. Hi, Shauna. Thank you so much for joining us today and helping us to clarify some of the confusion around this new legislation. Can you start by telling us a little bit about your background and what you specialize in?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me today. I'm excited to be here to shed a little bit of light on this new hot topic.
Mhm.
My name's Shauna Anderson. I'm an estate attorney. I practice estate planning primarily. I'm a partner in a law firm in Irvine, law in Stein, and I'm a certified specialist in estate planning. So that for you guys just kind of means I went and passed like another mini bar exam to specialize in this particular area and hold myself out as a specialist in estate planning. I've been doing estate planning since 2009. And my primary focus, like I said, is estate planning. The important part for you is just to know, I guess that whole world of like general practitioner is kind of to the wayside. And now to really make sure that your affairs are being handled correctly, finding somebody in that specialty is certainly my recommendation.
100% agree. So I guess Shauna and I are just going to have a little dialogue here and kind of go through first off what Prop 19, what it is and who does it affect? Like I guess the first question is who should be paying attention to this right now?
Really, any property owner should be paying attention to some degree. Property owners are where it's really going to impact
Mhm.
people. Perhaps maybe not today, but
Mhm.
sometime in the future, it may impact them. There's certainly some positives, and then there's some negatives that are going to be impacting Californians. I would say, if you're 55 and older, you probably want to be paying a little closer attention because the legislation really can be impacting you in a positive manner if you're, looking to downsize your home or perhaps just move and relocate to a new location.
And does this also apply if they're looking to like upgrade their home?
Yes, so that's part of the positive aspect of the change that we're looking at. Before, you had to relocate, and there had to be some reciprocity between the counties, and
Mhm.
so there had to be some real good due diligence on behalf of property owners when they looked to do that, and they had to downsize into a home of equal or lesser value.
Mhm.
And today, the beautiful part is we can actually transition into a home of greater value and take that basis over into a new home in a new county, and um, it's all across California.
Mhm. Is there an upper dollar limit on the, I guess, the new home that they decide to purchase?
So there's going to be a dollar amount that's transferred over, but there's not an amount that you're going to be limited to in buying. So in other words, you can take a home where you have an assessed value of 200,000 and transition that new base over into the new property, but it doesn't have to be of equal or lesser value like it used to.
Mhm. So if the home were, for example, like a $2 million home, do they still pay the basis of like the 200,000, or is there like a up
So
to?
if they sell the home for 200,000, or excuse me, they sell it for 2 million and their basis is 200,000, they'll be able to transition into a new home of $2 million
I
with
see.
the basis of 200,000. Okay.
Mhm.
But let's say they buy a new property worth 2.5 million.
Mhm.
The new 500,000 that is kind of up and above what
Mhm.
they sold for, that will be reassessed
Mhm.
at fair market value, but it's going to be much less.
Right. So they'll only pay the taxes on that 500,000
There
difference
will be an
plus that.
adjustment.
Yeah.
Yes, there'll be an adjustment of fair market value on the 500,000. Correct.
Mhm. Got it. That makes sense. And that definitely seems like a nice perk for those that are 55 and older? Because I know under the current, I think it's Prop 60 and Prop 90, right? They have to move to one that's equal value or less in order to get this benefit. If the property ends up being more than what they're selling theirs for, then they don't get to transfer it. Is that?
That's right. And so I really think there's going to be a lot of movement in the community of 55 and older,
Yeah.
because maybe before they were holding on to their property because of that
Right.
low basis. And so with this, I think they're going to be able to have a good opportunity to downsize and get in, perhaps to a nicer property.
Hmm.
And it would still be affordable to them.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I guess we went over, those are the pros. I mean, are there any drawbacks to this new Prop 19 legislation that we need to be aware of?
So I would say the negative aspect that some people are looking at is really when there's a change of ownership. And the change of ownership is going to happen when there's naturally a sale or there's a death. And the highlight really is hanging on the death aspect or even the gift. The death aspect is where there used to be, and under the current law today, I could transfer my property. You're able to file for an exclusion under Prop 58, where you're able to file for this exclusion and the exemption amount that you were under before would apply. So in other words, let me kind of explain. If mom and dad bought a property for $300,000 and when they pass away, the property is $3 million, there's a huge amount of fair market value change. And so under the current law, which will be in place until February 15th, if the filings get placed, there will be the ability to preserve the property tax basis. So if they were paying $3,000 a year for property taxes, the children would be able to assume that property with that same basis and not have a jump up in the property taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So with the new law change, what's happening is if the property is going to be a rental property, for instance, instead of the child moving in and making their primary residence, there will be a jump in fair market value property taxes. Mm-hmm. So if the fair market value property taxes is really $24,000 a year on that, then now you have children who are going to be inheriting property and paying the fair market value of the property taxes. So that's definitely one of the negatives that people are seeing here.
Right. And like as it stands now, whether it's primary or an investment property, when the kids inherit it now, they're still able to transfer that original tax basis, correct?
That is correct. It's basically $1 million of assessed value that we can look at. And if there's $1 million of assessed value on mom and $1 million of assessed value on dad, there's a lot of wealth that was able to be transferred, and property taxes staying low. Mm-hmm. Will no longer be the case moving forward after
right.
February 16th.
February 16th is the day that it lapses, right?
That's right. So the point that I also want to make is if the child who inherits the property elects to make that property their primary residence, there's the ability to file for the exclusion, and the exclusion will allow for $1 million above whatever the tax base is at the time of ownership change. So in other words, if mom and dad owned a property and their basis was $120,000, mm-hmm. there's going to be the ability to take $1 million plus the 120, and that will be what stays under and does not get reassessed. If the property is worth $2 million, the portion that will be reassessed at fair market value for property taxes is going to be the extra $880,000. So from 1,120,000, right, mm-hmm. to the 2 million is going to be what will be brought up to fair market value. Mm-hmm. So you can see there's going to be some sort of a blend mm-hmm. of the taxes.
So they still get a little bit of savings, but it's definitely not what it is as it is now
What it
under
is
the current
today.
map.
That's right. Yeah, quite honestly, the challenge that I think a lot of the kids are going to face is determining whether or not they really want to stay in the primary residence.
Right. Because if they don't end up staying, then it's reassessed at full market value in its
Correct.
entirety under the new proposition.
Yeah, and I can just tell you based on my experience, I don't have a lot of children who end up moving into a property that parents own.
Right.
What usually has happened, or at least traditionally, they will keep it and it will become a rental property.
Mm-hmm.
Where before they could be a lot more competitive on the market just because their property taxes were so much lower. So they could, make it more competitive in that way. But, I think there's going to be a lot more sale due to the change.
Right. Because they're not going to be able to afford like the property taxes, or it's not
Right.
going to make sense financially to keep.
That's right. Yes, yes.
That makes sense. Um, so, well, I mean, is there anything that they can do to, I guess, avoid this? Is other than just is it just outright transferring it now before the
So
15th, or is there anything else they can do to kind of work around?
So there's a couple of options. Obviously, I'm not giving legal advice. Every person's,
Right.
situation is very unique to them, and it really needs to be evaluated carefully. But there are opportunities to do outright gifts, kind of like you described. The challenge you have to face with an outright gift is if the children plan to keep the home, um, you're probably in a good position because you just triggered a change of ownership, which will keep the property tax base low,
Mm-hmm.
and they will be able to fall under the current law. But you don't have the ability to get the step up in basis when the parent dies
Right.
because you have a gift and a carryover basis.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever basis mom and dad had in the property at the time the gift was made, in the hypothetical we're giving right now, the basis was 120,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the children would assume the property with a basis of 120.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, if they ever go to sell the property sometime in the future, they will have a basis
Capital
of
gain.
120.
Yeah.
Yep. And they're going to deal with a capital gains tax
Mm-hmm.
issue. So all of those different situations should be evaluated when someone's getting involved in trying to plan.
Right. So it's super important that, people consult like a estate planning professional like yourself when making these decisions, because there could be really significant tax implications, right?
Absolutely. They could be not even aware of what kind of implications they could be creating. So definitely encourage them to make sure to get a hold of someone who is familiar with the type of planning that, will help avoid some of these tax consequences.
Absolutely. So coming up next, we have some questions from AK Luxury Property clients and friends that they've sent over, and I'll put it up on our screen so that we can kind of talk about them together and see if maybe we can shed some light on these. Let's see. Okay. Here we go. Okay, so this is the first question. I know we had already touched a little bit on this $1 million number, and I think a lot of people are just really confused on how that actually breaks down and what that means. But I think if we maybe do an example or something, it might help.
Yeah, so this comes back to what I was just referring to. So if we have a property that fair market value is $2 million,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and the
The parents' home.
and the base is 120,000 for tax purposes.
So that's how much we're saying the parents paid, 120,000.
The base that the parents have is 120.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get $1 million plus the 120.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's how you land at the $1,120,000 number.
Mm-hmm.
That will fall under the exclusion,
Mm-hmm.
but that only applies if the child moves into the home and declares it as their primary residence.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then what happens on the extra 880,000
Mm-hmm.
is that gets reassessed to fair market value for the property tax purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
it
that,
won't jump up completely
mhm,
to fair market value, but it's going to jump up, a significant portion.
correct. And this only works if they're moving into mom and dad's house.
That's right. That's right.
Awesome. And then let's see. Our next question is, we also touched a bit about on the step-up basis. I think a lot of people are a little confused, like, do they work together? Do they not? Does one trump the other? So maybe you can
So
clarify this a little bit too.
this is two separate tax rules, right? So step up in basis is dealing with capital gains tax, and
Correct.
Prop 19 is dealing with property tax.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're dealing with the property tax and a property coming into a child's estate and the child declaring that they're going to keep the property, you're not going to be dealing with capital gains tax quite yet until or if the property is sold at some future time. So the step up in basis would occur at the time mom and dad pass away, and it's going to be a step up to the fair market value as of the date of death.
Mm-hmm.
But for the property tax, you're also going to get the value as of the date of passing for fair market value purposes.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to impact the tax differently because we're dealing strictly with property tax here. So depending upon if the child moves into the property or not, will declare as to whether the property tax will jump up also to fair market value.
Noted. So if the child were to move in, then they still get to retain that original tax basis, but the property also steps up in value to current fair market value.
So if the child moves in and declares the property as their primary residence, and you're going to use the parent's basis, so that's where that $120,000 tax basis in our example has come into play. Plus, you're going to get to add the $1 million to it. So now you're at a new basis of $1,120,000, and any fair market value of the property above that number will jump to fair market value for property tax purposes.
And then, but if they have the step up basis too, then they just don't pay capital gains when they when and if they sell the property.
The capital gains is going to be triggered upon sale.
Selling.
Correct. So if the property is sold immediately upon mom and dad's passing for $2 million, and the value of the property at the date of death is $2 million, there will be no capital gains tax. The children will have to recognize because of the step up.
Right. But if they decide to move in, then it'll be like what you just calculated.
That's
the blended rate.
For property tax purposes.
And this is all for Prop 19. Now, if they were to do, if this all happened under current law, then it would just be, they would be able to transfer the tax.
So under current law, there'd still be a step up in basis, just like after February 16th. But under current law, so up until February 15th, if someone passes away and there's a change of ownership, then what happens is the parent to child transfer can be filed. So the BOE 58 form can be filed, and the child will be able to take over the current basis of mom and dad.
Noted. But this one's kind of hard to like plan for, right? So
the opportunity to put a property, let's say a vacation home, into an irrevocable trust is an option for some people. And it's just, there's definitely a lot of counseling that goes into it to make sure that they really understand the implications of putting property in irrevocable trust. We don't know all of the rules quite yet because it hasn't been published. But at the end of the day, some of our clients are very eager to do whatever they can to give themselves the best opportunity to actually save on the property tax side.
Right. And I think that kind of leads into our next question, which is about LLCs, joint tenancies, irrevocable trusts. I guess a lot of people have been asking you, what can we do now prior to February 15th to kind of protect?
So a joint tenancy relationship is not going to create the kind of action that will save on the property tax reassessment. The change of ownership needs to happen now, and it needs to actually be a completed gift, or someone needs to pass away and the change of ownership occurs that way. The irrevocable trust is a viable option.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely one that the gift has to be completed to the trust, but there are some ways that we can hopefully preserve the step up in basis at the time that the parent passes away. And then the LLC is an option if the property was originally owned in an LLC, because if the property at the time of death is transferred and they don't change ownership more than 50%, then a change of ownership for the LLC purpose does not trigger the change of ownership for purposes of reassessment on the property tax side. But the challenge there is, was the property acquired under the LLC?
Right. Like they can't just dump it into an LLC now.
No, because it was originally owned by mom and dad.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So if the property is already in a trust, Prop 19 is still going to affect it, right?
If it's in a revocable living trust, it's going to impact just the same as if they own it as an individual.
Noted. Okay, our next question. And I think you already answered this one, right? We asked if there was like an upper dollar limit on how much their upgrade home is, and you said no, it's just they will have that blended rate.
That's right, if they go above the fair market value of the home they sell, correct?
The home they sell, yes. Perfect. And next, this one says, if I put my primary house, which was purchased for 1.75 and currently worth 5 to 6, into a gift trust for my children, will the property get reassessed when they receive the gift? And I think you also answered this, which is it would be right at the new rate.
So if this is done prior to the law change, which would be February 15th, there are specific trusts that potentially would preserve the property tax base of the 1.75 or whatever the assessed value on that home is currently. So I think for this particular person, exploring the ability of gifting it into an irrevocable trust might be very worthwhile, because there might be a way to be able to keep that for the benefit of the kids and not have the taxes jump up at the time the parents pass away.
Right. And I was also thinking, because for this particular one, it is already like, even the original basis is well over $1 million, and it's already pretty high. So even if they were to get reassessed, like there's a lot more that the kids are going to have to pay in taxes. Like
if the property for property tax purposes jumps up to a $6 million valuation, they're going to pay significantly more tax. So that's why I'm saying they're a very good candidate for an irrevocable trust, because to preserve the property tax base, closer to the 1.75 number would definitely be advantageous for them.
Yeah, because even the blended rate would be what, 1.75 plus the 1 million. Am I doing that right?
If the children at the time move in, so you're saying without a gift trust,
right? Without a gift trust,
yeah, they would get $1 million on top of 1.75, and then anything above that number would then be fair market value. Right. But it's still going to be a really significant jump.
Yeah, compared to just taxes on 1.75.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so but pay attention. The next one is, if my child resides with me and the primary house is his primary too, will the property get reassessed when he gets it?
So I assume the property is owned by the parent, and
by the parents, and the kid lives there.
And so the answer is going to be yes. They're going to be able to qualify under the new law for that $1 million plus whatever the tax is. So kind of how we've been describing it, to get that exclusion amount, but there will still be potentially a reassessment if the value of the property with the $1 million attached is exceeded.
Mm-hmm. And this is assuming just the parents' names are on the title, like parents own the property.
That's right.
What if the son's name is also on title?
So it would depend upon whatever's getting transferred to the son at the time of the death of the parent. So whatever portion the parent owns, then there's going to be some blend there as well.
I see. Okay. Next one. This one's a little long, but I think it had to do with the interpretations on that $1 million as well. And I think you clarified that it's 1 million on top of the original tax basis and that amount you get to pay the original tax on, and anything over that is reassessed at fair market.
That's correct, yes.
Yes, because this was like, I guess the example down here is if the property was purchased at 1.5 and it increased to 3.5 at the time the child inherited it, the child pays property tax at 2.5 with the current rate. Is that?
And then was it a $3 million? Yeah. And then the 500,000 up and above would just be reassessed at fair market value.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay, next. So this one is also, I think, talking about the title situation. So if the title to the primary residence is transferred to the child before February 15th and the parents' names are removed from title, will the children retain the original tax basis?
All the documentation is prepared correctly and timely filed. That is going to be the case. They're going to fall under the current law.
Mm-hmm.
But again, these are circumstances that really need to be thought through carefully.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a lot of situations come up that people expect it to go one way, and unfortunately, gifting a property means you lose control.
Mm-hmm.
And whoever you gift it to now has 100% control, which means they could sell it if they wanted to. Things change sometimes. And so we just want to make sure that people are educated on the decisions that they're making.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And does this also apply to investment homes owned by parents?
So this applies to single family residences. This applies to multi, unit places. It applies to commercial property. It applies to, vacant land, et cetera. Across the board, it's going to impact real estate in California.
Got it. And I think this is our last question. What happens if multiple children inherit the parents' primary home? Like, do they all have to stay in it in order to keep the basis?
Well, if one of the children elects to keep the property, it really depends upon the estate and the way that the assets are distributed.
Mm-hmm.
If it's going through the median of a trust, then perhaps maybe there's the ability for one child to inherit the family home and the other children to inherit cash to the equivalent of what the value of the home represents. Mm-hmm. And in which case, if there's good planning, then that child who inherits the property should be able to keep the tax basis as it was, plus the $1 million, and then file for that to be their primary residence and be able to get that exclusion.
Mm-hmm. So it would be like a little trickier if they said like all 3 children are, equal owners to.
If the property is the only asset in the trust, for instance, mm-hmm. then there's going to be a reassessment as to the share of the children who do not occupy the home as their primary residence.
That makes sense. Okay, and I think that's all the questions that we had. Is there anything else that you think is important for people to know?
I just think that if there are questions that you have about your own situation that you want to get answered, I would really urge you to take course now and seek out a professional to be able to help you. Estate planners are extremely busy trying to plan right now, and so you don't want to wait until the last minute. It's fast approaching, so if you have questions, I would really urge you to get out there and get them answered.
Agreed. And Shauna, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all this wonderful information on Prop 19. If anyone else has any questions or want to set up an appointment with Shauna, feel free to reach out to me or Shauna directly, and we'll make sure you get access to all the info that you need to make your decisions. But like Shauna said, don't drag your feet on this one because the deadline is coming up soon and everyone is getting super booked up. So wish everybody the best of luck and thanks for tuning in. And we will add Shauna's contact information in the captions.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks, Shauna. Bye.
Bye.